All right. Hello, everyone who has joined us so far. Thank you for being here. We're going to give it just a few more seconds to let people join and get settled, and then we'll jump right in. All right, perfect. Looks like we're ready to get started. So I know we have just 1 hour of your time today and a lot of great content to get through. So we'll dive right in. My name is Jenna Schwinnard, Marketing Executive at PCA Technology Group, and I'll be your host for this cybersecurity awareness training. I know our speaker today has a lot of great tips and insights that you'll want to be aware of as you navigate today's threat landscape. And that speaker is our very own Brian Powell, Chief Technology Officer and Certified Ethical Hacker at PCA. So as we go, please do keep your line muted, but feel free to submit any questions that you have in the chat window and we'll make sure to get to it. This will be recorded and we'll be sure to send you a recap after the event as well. So with all that being said, I'll now hand it off to you, Brian.
Thank you, Jenna. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. We got a lot of content to cover here. So welcome to the May edition of our cybersecurity awareness training program. For those of you that may have attended one of these in the past, there's some new content obviously added to this one that you probably may not have seen. These do get updated frequently, so while we do hold these monthly, some of the content is duplicated, but others are added based on what happens out there. So as mentioned, I am the CTO here at PCA. I basically run our networking side of the business and manage it and things like that. I'm also a certified ethical hacker, and basically all that means is pretty much everything we're talking about here I know how to do, and that's basically to be able to protect our clients and stuff from those type of attacks. You obviously have to know how to do some of it, so that's really a fancy way of just saying, hey, I know how to do this stuff. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So why are we here? What is the big deal about cybersecurity? Well, obviously, anybody that is in touch with reality when it comes to IT, or even pick up the newspaper, the news, whatever your preference of information is, you'll see that almost on a daily basis, cybersecurity is in the headlines some way, shape, or form. You can see on this slide here, there's a couple of recent ones that got breached, and that list is going to continue to grow as time goes on. Last year, obviously, it exceeded any type of attacks in 2020, and when it comes to senior IT, most of those leaders feel that they may lack sufficient protection to stop these type of cyber criminals. So it's just something that you definitely need to be aware of. And for some clients, you do have compliancy issues. Anybody that's went or has recently come up with that does have cybersecurity insurance. If your policy renewal has come up, you've probably seen that, hey, wait a minute, these questions are starting to get a lot more specific and asking a lot of stuff that I have no clue how to answer. And there's a reason for that, because the insurance company is there to make money while they do protect you and offer some protection from these type of attacks. They obviously are there as a business to make money, and they've realized that with all these claims and incidences, their profit line has not been as good as what it has been previously. So who's responsible? Pretty much everybody on this call or on this webinar. It's not just the IT provider or your IT department or whatever. It's not the owner. It's pretty much everyone. And the reason why that is because really the weakest link in the whole entire cybersecurity realm is really the end user. And we're not pointing fingers at anybody, but the reality is it's that you can have the best protections in the world, but if somebody opens the door for a bad guy, and that's what they do, and it's the reality that all those protections are worth nothing at that point if the end user lets the guy in or the person in. So that's really what it comes down to. And you can see here, just a quick cartoon thing here. You can see you have all the protection in one corner, and then you have human error over in the other. And it's all it takes is one human error to pretty much knock out any type of protection layers you have in place. So the other thing to keep in mind too is if a bad guy or a hacker does get into your system, they could be in your system sitting for over 7 months and without being detected. They're basically in there gathering information, trying to figure out who they have, what is valuable, what isn't valuable, and then at some point in time, they'll raise the red flags and say, "Oh, hey, by the way, I got you," and it'll either be a ransomware screen or you know, we're gonna leak your data or something or another. They're gonna give themselves up at some point or another when they feel that they've got enough information that is valuable to them. You know, at that point, it's probably too late. So the idea is, one, stop them before they get there, or two, try to detect them very, very quickly once they're in that system. And the other stat here is, you know, in the event of a major breach or attack, almost 60% of the businesses end up going out of business within 6 months after that time. So it's serious. So unless you're a big company and have big pockets, this could get extremely expensive very, very quickly. You know, back a few years ago, you know, when ransomware first started becoming a big thing, you know, your payments were a couple $100 here and there or whatever. Now it's in the millions. So I mean, it's increased phenomenally since this has become what they call as a business model. So just keep that in mind. So how's all this done? Basically, it's done through what's called social engineering. And again, as I mentioned, the weakest link in the whole thing is the end user. So the idea is to trick the user or manipulate the user into doing something that the bad guys want them to do. And this is a lot easier than what you actually think. You know, it's very easy to persuade people to do things because a lot of times they have the tendency to trust, and they're basically manipulating that trust against them. I like to think of this as basically an electronic form of a con man. That's really what it was, or what it is. It's extremely easy to get people to do things. And we'll go through and show you some of the tactics that they do, and then also how to potentially avoid some of those pitfalls. So some of the most common attacks, obviously, the biggest ones are email. Almost probably 90 to 95% of the attack methods are done via email. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. You know, with phishing, spearfishing, we'll explain a little bit of what some of that stuff is. Social media can also be utilized. So anybody that has social media pages, that can be used for reconnaissance or information gathering. And, you know, some of the trends, obviously, ransomware, which we talked a little bit about, and extortion, which is basically, hey, I've got your data, and I'm either going to post it on the internet and leak it to everybody, or you're going to pay me X amount of money with an extortion type of thing. Who's behind it? Sometimes it's criminal groups. Sometimes it's malicious, and very, very unusually is it malicious insiders, but that can be a case too. And sometimes it's you know, third world nation states sometimes that are also behind this, where they're, you know, those governments are actually paying people to hack U.S. companies or other type of companies for profitability. Excuse me. Some of the attack vectors, again, most of the time it's done via mobile, sometimes cloud, you know, and again, the email electronic thing. Very, very rarely is it physically on site. So that's not normally a common vector unless it would happen to be like I said above there, the malicious insiders. So very, very uncommon though in that situation. So when it comes to web surfing, let's say, you know, when you're at work, you want to keep your web surfing limited to business use only. What I mean by that is, you know, don't be using your work PC for personal usage or personal browsing or you know, looking up, I don't know, looking up baking things or gardening things or vacation spots or whatever. Wait till you get home to do that. And the reason why that is because, again, if you keep it limited to business use, your attack vector is much smaller than it would be that you're just surfing everything under the sun, because you want to know what the latest trend is in clothing or something of that nature. So you definitely want to keep that limited, and we'll show you here why very, very shortly. I did mention that social media is riddled with bad guys just waiting to pluck easy victims. So, unless you use social media for business purposes, I would suggest staying off of it, because sometimes there's bad links in there, sometimes there's attachments, sometimes you're giving up information that you may not even realize. And an example of that would be, sometimes you see those surveys that you have, or that maybe your friend or a loved one posted or something. Hey, what's your favorite color? Hey, what was your first car? Hey, what was your school mascot? Hey, what school did you attend, or whatever. That's all password reset information, in case you're not aware of it. So that could be put there by a bad guy. And a lot of the password reset questions are, what's your favorite color, or what was your high school mascot? So or what was your first car? Things of that nature. So if you're answering those questions, that could be set up by a hacker that is actually whittling down what potential password reset things are for you as an individual. So just keep that in mind. And this is, I'm not just talking about your LinkedIn or your Facebook or your Twitters or your Instagrams or Snapchats. I'm also talking about LinkedIn too. LinkedIn is also used pretty heavily when it comes to people updating their statuses, and it gives the bad guys potential new victims, especially if they're starting new companies and things like that. I'm not saying you can't use those things, but be wary when you're updating your information, if all of a sudden you start getting weird emails and things like that, because it's very easy to scrape that information as an outside person, and I can get updates instantly once something's changed. So if I'm actually specifically watching Facebook or LinkedIn in this case, you update your status from, hey, I'm employed here, now I changed my employment, or hey, I got a new title or whatever. I can get that almost instantly, that change, with some software that is monitoring for that kind of stuff. So just be aware of that. The other thing too is you obviously want to keep your browsers updated. When your browser is saying to update itself, make sure you're updating it very, very quickly. Firefox, Chrome, the new Edge, which is based on Chrome in the new version of Microsoft, those browsers do sometimes update themselves, but you can also check and make sure, by going to the About page in the browser itself and doing a manual update. A lot of times I think we just sent that out, how to do that recently. But those browsers, do update very, very often because of potential security risks and stuff. So you definitely want to make sure that you're keeping your browsers updated, because that's a very, very easy way to hijack a person's computer with one of their security issues. You also want to be aware of pop-ups. So, again, if you keep your surfing limited to business, most of your pop-ups you're either going to already be aware of, or you're going to expect them. Anybody that visits some of the local news sites or whatever, sometimes they pop up saying, hey, if you want to continue to read this article, subscribe now, or something like that. Those things are expected. However, if you're on a site that you may not have ever visited before, that pop-up could actually be malicious. And you think you're closing it out, when in fact it's not only closing the window out, but it's also downloading something in the background that you weren't even aware of. So you want to definitely be suspicious of that. And if you do get one of those windows, like I said, the common browsers nowadays do have what's called a pop-up blocker built into them for the most part. So they do stop a lot of this stuff, but there's in the event you do get one of those windows that pop up, and you're not 100% sure if it's valid or not, instead of clicking on that little X, little X box or button up in the top right-hand corner, or a close button if it's on there, you can actually hit Control W on your keyboard, and that will usually close down the window with focus, which will get rid of that. Or you can also hit Alt F4, and this works across all platforms, whether it's Windows or Mac or whatever your browser or your machine of choice is. But that'll at least close those windows down without you having to click on any of those potential dangerous areas. This leads us into the next thing. So this is a new attack vector that's been going out, and it's kind of tied with web surfing, and it's called a browser in the browser attack. So basically what it is, it uses fake SSO, which SSO stands for single sign-on. And basically what that is a lot of times when you sign in or when you're signing up for something, you may see it pop up, and I'll show you some examples here on the coming screen. Where it's trying to use your Microsoft account, or maybe your Facebook account, or your Apple ID, or your Google, or your Discord, or Steam if you're a gamer, things of that nature, that it basically will use that authentication method and try to tie into something that you already have. So a lot of people are using these type of authentication methods because it's easier to remember a single username and password and use it across the board than it is to remember all these other every single login and password for every single account that you have. The problem is that this is done in a malicious way, and it actually hijacks that single sign-on session, and it's extremely difficult to detect, and it's super easy to fall for. So again, if you're on a site that you're not 100% sure is actually the right site, you just happen to stumble upon this, you could fall for this very, very easily, and then they will actually steal your login credentials for whatever one of these methods that you're using. So here's an example of it. So this is, let's say you hit a page and all of a sudden you want to log into, in this case, you're trying to log in using your Google authentication. So you can see on the side here, you can continue with Apple, continue with Google, or continue with Facebook, or you can continue with email. In this case, they pick Google, and it brings up this screen here, which will let you put your Google email in there, and then it will tie back into your Google account and use that as the login method for this site that you're trying to visit. The problem with it is, on the next screen here, you can see I can set up a fake site, which is on the left-hand side here, that asks for a Facebook login. So the one on the side here is a fake version of it, and the one on the right-hand side is actually the real one. And you can see both of them, even by the URL at the top there next to the padlock. Those URLs are exactly identical. So that, if I have a malicious website set up to make it look like Facebook, you could potentially log in with your Facebook login credentials on a fake phishing site, thinking it's the real one, because you can't even tell the difference at this point. And it basically, what's going to happen is it's going to give me that information, so I can then reuse it anywhere else I want to reuse it, having your Facebook credentials in this case here. And then here's another example, the exact same thing when it comes to Google. If you're using Google things, exactly the same thing. You've got the phishing site on the one side here and the real site on the other. And again, they look identical. The only difference in this case here is on the phishing site, they have a create account, where on the real one it doesn't. But that's the only difference, really. Even if you look at the URLs, it's actually pointing to Google, and it has the padlock too. So you can't even think that, oh, well, it's a fake site, it won't have that. Yes, it still does, because this is basically manipulating the browser to present the fake site within the real site. So you've got to be very, very careful on these methods, because it's extremely, extremely easy to fall for. So with that said, again, what I recommend is obviously keep your business surfing limited, and be very, very careful and cognizant of where you're using those single sign-on methods. Again, whether it's your Apple ID or Discord or Facebook, Google, whatever method it is that you're using, just be very, very careful what you're using that on. So tying into email, as I mentioned, 95% of almost 95% of the attack vectors are done via email. So again, the easiest way to eliminate some of this broad range is don't utilize your work email for personal usage. Same thing when it comes to the browsers. Don't be using your email for your shopping, for your gym memberships, your whatever. You keep that stuff on your personal side and keep your business emails strictly for business use. Don't sign up for your Amazon alerts or your reading clubs or whatever, your recipe, your coupon cards, whatever people sign up for. Keep that on your personal account, not your business account, because a lot of the attack methods that the bad guys use are sending fake shipping notices, fake payment notices, fake Amazon orders, eBay, all that kind of stuff. It could be FedEx, UPS. If you're not doing any of that stuff in your business email, they are extremely easy to figure out, oh, wait, I don't do any of this stuff in that, so why am I getting this in my business email? Exactly the point. If you don't use your work email for that, you're not going to be getting those type of emails. You can simply delete them. You don't even have to think about opening them up because you know for a fact they're fake. And also, if you do hold true with keep your work email aside from your personal, don't access your personal email when you're on your work PC. Don't go into the web portal and look at your web or in your personal stuff via the web, because if you do, it's kind of like you're sharing your work email because you're actually opening that stuff up on your work PC. So what I would suggest is, if you do need to check your work email, do it on your cell phone and make sure you're using the data plan, and then you can avoid a lot of those potential attack vectors. The other thing I recommend is, this is an example of what's called preview pane, or reading pane. They changed the name of it. But basically what that is on the right-hand side here, you can see it shows you the contents of the email, and that email that's being displayed there is the one that's highlighted in the center there with the gray box at the top there. So what happens is when an email comes in and it comes in at the top of your email box, it gets highlighted and then it gets displayed over in this reading pane automatically. Yes, it's a convenience because I don't have to open the email up, but the problem is if this happens to be a malicious email and there happens to be some kind of malicious content within this email, this feature is actually opening up this email automatically without me doing it, which means this could potentially be running without my knowledge. So we highly recommend disabling this. And to do that, you just go up to the view up at the top here, and then the drop down here at the reading pane. If you hit that drop down arrow, it should say, I think, left, bottom, and off. If you just turn that off, that will actually get rid of this entire screen over here, and turn off that function that will automatically open up those emails. You'll have to double click them, but you know what? That extra click could give you the sanity check to say, you know what? Wait, this is UPS shipping notice. Again, I don't do that in my work email because I follow what I'm supposed to be doing, so you wouldn't have to open it. Where this piece of software, if that feature's turned on, it would open it automatically. There's definitely some pluses to turning this off, and minor inconvenience because you have to double click the messages now, but it's much better to be safer than sorry, in my opinion. So here's an example of what a phishing email looks like. So this one here appears like it's coming from Microsoft Outlook, and it's basically saying, hey, your password's expired, and I need you to click on this change your password section here, or the link down at the bottom here. And it's designed to trick you into clicking on those two links. My suggestion is, if you ever get one of these emails, don't click on any links that are buried in these emails or included in these emails, unless you're expecting it. And I'll explain what that means here shortly. My advice is never click on any of the links that are buried in any of these emails. If you think this is actually a valid email, as I mentioned, this looks like it's coming from Microsoft. What I want you to do instead of clicking on these links is I want you to open up a browser, again, whether it's Chrome, Firefox, Edge, whatever it is you're using, Safari if you're a Mac user. Open up a browser, go to Microsoft's site yourself by typing it in yourself, and log in with your credentials. That way, one, you know you're on the real Microsoft site and you're authenticating against the real Microsoft site. If this is valid, it's the minute you log in, it's going to say, hey, your password's expired and you need to reset it. If you don't do that and you just blindly click on one of these two links, these links are set up to a malicious site. And basically what happens, it looks just like Microsoft's site. And it's going to ask you for your login and your password. You're going to put those two pieces of information in there. You're going to hit login, and it's probably going to give you some kind of error message. And then it's going to redisplay the site, and then it's going to ask you to do it again. And depending on how the bad guys set up that site, it might work the second time or it might fail continuously. Basically, the site is there to harvest your credentials. So every time you enter that stuff in, it's actually recording what you're writing and sending it to the bad guys that set up that malicious site. Now, the reason why it might work the second time is because some of the more smarter criminals have decided, well, the first time you visit that site, I'm going to send you to a fake site that looks like Microsoft, and then I'm going to redirect you to the real Microsoft site. So when you log in the second time, it actually works, and you just think you mistyped your password or something the first time around. So again, they're manipulating you, and you forget all about it. Meanwhile, they have your username and password because it probably was right the first time, but they just make you think that you mistyped it. So that's a tactic that they use. So again, the easiest way to avoid that, do not click on any links that come in an email ever, unless you're expecting it. And I'll explain what that means here very shortly. Again, here's another one that looks like it's coming from a bank. It says it wants you to verify an attempt to withdraw money. They want you to click on this link here. Again, do not click on this link. If you are in this case, a trusted bank customer, what I want you to do is open up a browser, type in trustedbank.com, log into that site that you opened up in that browser, and log in that way. Again, if this is legitimate, it will tell you as soon as you log in that you have to verify something somewhere. Again, this is going to send you to a fake site that's going to now steal your banking credentials, and they're going to wreak havoc on your bank account when they start transferring money all over the place using their stolen credentials. So this is another example. This one here is a little different. So this one here is more of a scare tactic. And they get people to fall for this because it starts out saying, hey, it looks like XYZ or XXXXX is your password. Now, obviously, that would contain a password that is probably something you would recognize. And then it says, you're probably wondering why you're getting this email, blah, blah, blah. We've got video proof of you on adult-oriented sites. And if you don't pay us $2,900, we're gonna embarrass you in front of your coworkers, your family, your whatever. And people fall for this because they immediately go into that fight or flight thing in the brain, that because that password that they mentioned in the first opening line there is something that they recognize. Like, oh, wait a minute, how do they get my password? What the heck? And then they just kind of go into that mind where you're not thinking rationally about the rest of this. I can tell you 9 times out of 10, probably 9.9 times out of 10, the rest of this content, they don't have any video proof. They don't have anything. They're just trying to scare you into thinking they have it, and they do that because they put that password there. So again, you're probably thinking, well, how did they get that password? If you're using your email, your business email for non-business use, it opens up the possibility that one of those other sites that you use that information on could get breached. And it could be a gym site, it could be whatever. If that site gets breached, the first thing the bad guys go after is a password database. They dump it, they get it offline, and then they run software that tries to figure out what your passwords are. And depending on how big your password is, will really determine how fast they can figure out what your password is. And once they figure that out, well, now they got your email address too. So they're going to email you with that password and try to use that as a scare tactic against you. So the only thing you really have to worry about here is if that password is a current password and you're using it somewhere else besides whatever, you better make some wholesale changes very, very quickly, because they have your username, which is usually your email address because they emailed you, and they have an active password. So if they figure out where those two combinations actually match up, they can access your accounts with those. So just be aware of that. But the rest of this is really bogus. It's not true at all. So this one's called spearfishing. And this one's a little more targeted. So most of the other methods before was kind of scattershot, where they think of it as throwing breadcrumbs in a big pond or a big lake, not knowing if there's any fish in there at all. And they figure out what fish it is when it comes up and grabs the breadcrumb, hopefully. In this case here, this is more targeted. And this is usually targeted towards HR or payroll or something of that nature. And in this case, it's basically someone pretending to be an internal employee saying they want to change their direct deposit information, and they want it changed immediately for this effective pay date. So what happens is if you as a company don't have the proper procedures in place, and you just blindly follow this email, what's going to happen is you're going to send one of your employees' payroll or paychecks to a drop account that probably was set up at another bank with stolen credentials. The minute that money hits that bank account, it's going to get withdrawn. That account is going to be closed, and the bad guy that sent you this email pretending to be the internal person is gone with the wind. So you always need to have policies in place that physically verify the identity of the people requesting this kind of thing. Any type of financial, you need to physically verify. And that means you either call them at a known phone number that you already have on record and verify this, or physically walk up to the person and verify that. In this case, a lot of our customers do signatures, so they have a paper trail where the person physically signs it in person. So it's definitely something that you definitely need to have in place, because if you blindly follow this, you're going to be out whatever payroll you sent to that drop account, because it's not the internal person sending that to you. You can see that by the email address up here at the top. Obviously that's not an internal email address, but we'll show you how to avoid this in a few slides here, potentially avoid it. So whaling, this is going after the big fish, usually targeted towards C-level folks, and whether it's acting as the C-level or pretending, for people that report to the C-level, trying to use that scare tactic as the C-level person. So in this case here, it's somebody pretending to be, again, someone pretending to be a CFO internally, and they're sending this probably to somebody that reports to them, saying, hey, I'm out of the office. Can you process a wire transfer for me today? And let me know, and I'll send you the beneficiary details of where it is. Again, if you blindly follow these type of requests, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's eBay cards or Amazon cards or things like that, depending on who the person is that's doing it. They don't blindly follow these. Always pick up the phone and call. In this case, Sean needs to pick up the phone and call Roger on a known line, not a number that they give via email, or physically make sure that Roger is actually out of the office, and it's just not somebody pretending to be Roger out of the office. So you definitely need to follow up in person with these type of requests to avoid any potential blindly following this just via email. So. So I mentioned some of this could potentially be avoided with a very simple setting. Most people nowadays are using Microsoft for their email systems. In this case, this is simply, what this is this banner is actually called an external sender banner. So we've recommended this to almost all of our clients and enabled it in almost all of our clients, unless there's a specific reason why not. And what this does is basically it'll add a banner to every single inbound email that's coming externally, so you can visualize this. So if you go back to the screens prior to this, someone that's pretending to be Roger, well, in this case, this isn't an internal email address. It would have that banner right here at the top of that email address, much like this screen here. And that's immediate giveaway that, wait a minute, if this is an internal employee making this request, why is it coming from the outside? It wouldn't. It's a quick visual way of telling. You'll see it instantly. And it's very helpful, especially if you're looking at your email on your mobile phone, because it's real hard to figure out whether it's internal or external based on email addresses, if that's your method of trying to determine that. So in this case here, anything outside of your company would have this banner on it. So anybody from the outside pretending to be an internal employee would always have this email banner on it because it's coming physically from the outside. If it was an actual internal person sending it, then that banner would not be there. So you have a good indicator that, hey, I might be talking to the right person. Where in this case, you know for a fact visually that it's not the right person. So we highly recommend enabling that. It's not a paid thing. It's just a setting that needs to be activated. So if you happen to be not using that and you're one of our clients, obviously reach out and we could easily activate that for you. And finally, the last thing here is the bad guys figured out that some of the phishing attempts previously, some people are starting to get catch on to what they're doing, and it makes it a little more difficult. So they've changed to a little different method. It's called consent phishing, and basically what this is using a Microsoft application that is requesting permissions. So in this case here, you can see on the screen here, this basically is saying permission requested. It wants to maintain access to data, contacts, mail. It basically can act as you fully. So if you hit accept here blindly, if you don't be careful with one of these, you hit accept here blindly, basically what you're doing is you're giving this application full-blown access to your entire Microsoft ecosystem. That's your files, your everything, your Teams, your email, your calendar, everything you have in there without having a password. And this also bypasses MultiFactor, which we'll talk about here shortly. So if you blindly hit accept on this, you're basically giving the bad guys the keys to the kingdom without having your password. So obviously, if you get one of these screens, you want to be very, very cautious of hitting accept. In certain situations, you may have integrations or something with software that might want to tie in with Microsoft, but in most cases, if you get one of these and you're one of our clients, my recommendation is reach out to our support desk. Just say, hey, I got an application consent. Can you look at it real quickly? We can remote in very quickly, take a look at it and see if it's valid or not. In this case, you can see it actually says risky app and it also says unverified. In this case, this is a big red flag. The bad guys have not figured out how to get past the Microsoft verification process yet. Give them time, they will. But right now, if this was a legitimate app, it should say verified there instead of unverified. But again, if you get one of these pop up, even if it does say verified, you might want to reach out to us and just have us do a quick sanity check on it, just to make sure it's nothing that looks suspicious or not. And if you do happen to click on one of these or know you've clicked on one of these and then kind of had second thoughts about it, let us know immediately, because this is not very simple to find either after the fact. So if all of a sudden you start having weird email problems and stuff like that, and you don't remember that you clicked on this, it's not as easy to find in the back end when we're investigating it either. It takes some time to track that one down. So definitely be very, very cautious of clicking on anything like that. And then also now with COVID, obviously everyone has been hypersensitive when it comes to touching a lot of things. A lot of restaurants and things use these QR codes. However, this is a very, very simple way of manipulating people without them even realizing it. So, and a perfect example of that is the Super Bowl. It was the most classic advertising thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and all it was one of these bouncing QR codes on the screen. And I bet you 90% of the people on this call probably took their phones out and scanned that code to figure out what it was. That's all it was a screen with that code just bouncing over top of it, and it took you to a URL that was a marketing thing. in legitimate cases, yeah, that's good. In a malicious case, you don't know where you're going and you don't know what's happening. So you want to be careful of what you're scanning with these things. It's extremely easy to manipulate people. Even at restaurants, it's a malicious actor could just drop one of these on the table, and a person coming into that restaurant might think it's the menu, or they might even put menu. You scan that thing thinking you're going to get the menu, and it downloads a piece of malware on your phone that later is going to do malicious things down the road. So you got to be very, very careful with what you're doing with your phone, because these are pretty much automated, and you may or may not really realize where it's going and where it isn't going. So be very, very cautious of scanning these codes without kind of doing some investigative work prior. So that leads us on to USB and mobile devices. Obviously the USB, I'm talking about the flash drives, the little flash drives here. Basically the USB keys, flash drives. If you ever find one of these and you don't know where it came from, don't plug this thing in your machine. Give it, if you're one of our clients, give it to one of our engineers. We can scan it for you and make sure there's nothing malicious on it. In a controlled environment before you plug it directly into your PC where it would activate automatically. So that's one thing. If you do happen to use these to travel, to move stuff back and forth between work and another location, make sure you've got virus software at both ends and you're doing a scan at both sides to make sure that something's not hitchhiking back and forth on this actual USB key. The other thing too is obviously everyone has a smartphone now probably, and we know that these things are battery hogs. If you may be out and about, you want to be cautious of using any type of public charging station. Most of the charging stations are good. However, there could be some malicious ones that are set up. When what you might not realize is, yes, when you plug in your charging cord to one of those stations, it does charge, but a lot of times it actually turns this also into a USB key where it could actually pull data or push data to it. So I highly recommend just taking your wall brick charger and using that. The same thing applies. Don't plug it into your desktop or your PC with just the USB cord. Use the wall cable or the wall brick to charge that, just so you're cautious about anything in regards to just plugging it blindly into your laptop. So we mentioned a little bit about the passwords. These are our recommendations at this point. I've actually increased this a little bit, and we'll show you on the screen here why. It used to be 9 characters. We've taken it up to at least 10 characters now. And it also needs to contain at least a special character, an uppercase letter, and a number. So basically, a special character is things like the exclamation mark, or an ampersand, or a $sign, or a pound sign, something like that is a special character. And then obviously uppercase and one number. And the reason why that is because you can see here, as I mentioned, the first thing that the bad guys go after once they get into a system is usually the password database. And they get that offline. There's special software out there that'll basically go through and randomly guess every possible combination that could be used for that password. So if you're running at anything up to 7 characters, and you can see here if it's just numbers only, I can guess that instantaneously. If it's lowercase, it's instant as well. Uppercase and lower is 2 seconds, and if you actually follow the numbers, upper, lowercase, and symbols, I can guess a 7-digit password in under 31 seconds with this piece of software. So if your password is 7 characters and it has numbers, uppercase, lowercase, letters, symbols, I can guess every possible combination in under 31 seconds. That's how fast you can get somebody's password. So with 10 characters, which is what we recommend, obviously, if you follow our guidelines where it's numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and symbols, it's going to take approximately 5 months to guess that. We also recommend that you change your passwords every 3 months. So the idea is that while the chance is possible that this could guess it instantly, depending on the randomization of it, but the idea is that within that 5-month period, you've already changed your password. So by the time they guess it, it's going to be reset and they have to start that process all over again. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game. Obviously, if you go up to even higher, if you do 11 characters, now you're up to 34 years. So you can see how this really extrapolates out the higher up in characters you go. But you have to be cognizant of this because with the technology that's out there today, the brute forcing of passwords once you get that database is extremely fast. It's something to be aware of. The other thing too is that we did mention multi-factor, and basically what multi-factor, it's something that you know and something that you have. So the something you know is your username and login, and the something you have is usually it will ask you once you put that information in. If you enabled multi-factor, it will usually do one of 2 or 3 things. It will either text or email you a code sometimes that'll go to your email or it'll go to your cell phone. Sometimes it will just ask you for the code that's being generated on your cell phone. Other times it'll actually push saying, hey, are you trying to log in? And you hit yes, and then it'll go. So the idea is that even if your credentials were compromised some way, shape, or form, that it makes it very, very difficult to get into your account without this phone piece of it, because it makes it much more difficult. It does stop. I know this used to be 99% of the hacker attempts. I've actually lowered it because there's ways of getting around this too. I say it stops anywhere between 85 and 95% of the hacker attempts by activating multi-factor. Again, all these layers of protection, nothing is ever going to get you to 100% safeness. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. We do as much as we can from our side as for our clients. We put a lot of layers in place to try to protect them and to keep the bad guys out. And all we can do is keep doing that and changing as they change their methods, because when you stop them, they figure out how to get around it. Then you got to stop them again and figure out how to get around it. It's like I said, it's constant back and forth when it comes to this. So the end user, really that's what the whole process of this is behind these presentations. If you don't have MFA, this will be the only sales pitch you're going to hear. We do offer a free trial of MFA if it's something that you want to try out if you don't use it already. So a 60-day free trial. That will be the end of the sales pitches. So the other thing too that people mention when it comes to passwords is, how am I going to remember all these passwords for all these sites and everything if I'm not, if I'm following these guidelines where I'm not reusing my passwords and using these strong passwords. There's a couple different ways you can do it. A lot of people are asking me, well, what about these online password managers that are out there? Are they safe? Me personally, I don't use those. I don't like them. They're huge targets for the bad guys, and many of them have already been breached. I don't prefer to put my passwords in those type of locations. I actually keep my passwords physically recorded. I do so electronically, but I do so in a way that you can write them down too on a piece of paper if you really wanted to, but make sure you're doing it in a coded way where you're not writing it completely. So what I mean by that is, let's say you go with a 9-digit password and you're going to write them down, whether it's electronically or physically on a piece of paper. What you can do is you can actually record 11 characters and that there's 2 extra characters somewhere in that password. You come up with whatever that pattern is. It could be 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end. It could be 2 at the beginning. It could be 2 at the end. However you want to come up with it. You know what that pattern is. You also know what those added characters are. And when you go to enter those passwords in, you just do so with those characters missing. So you just remove those characters before you go to enter them in. And that's a way of recording them. So if someone actually comes up and sees that list, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to try this password. Oh, wait, that doesn't work. I'm going to try this password. Oh, wait, that doesn't work. And they're going to give up because they think it's an outdated list of passwords. The one thing I will say is if you're adding characters, make sure you're randomizing whatever those characters are. So, if you're using 2 in the beginning, you don't use the same 2 characters on every one of your passwords. Randomize them. It doesn't matter what they are because you don't have to use them anyways, but don't use the same ones over and over and over again. Because again, I can actually run that through some software that will pick up that pattern, and it'll basically pretty much say, hey, you know what? All these characters match on these passwords. It's probably padding, and it will remove them, and then I'll try the password and end up getting it. So if you add characters, you got to be careful. The other tactic is you can remove characters. So again, 9 characters, you might only record 7 of them. You know the missing characters. Those characters are obviously going to be the same, so you can remember them. And it could be wherever you put them. 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end, 2 at the beginning, 2 at the end, however you want to do it. Those characters can be the same because you're not physically recording them. You remember them. So it could be, I don't know, whatever. What I would suggest is don't use your initials because that's a pretty easy guess. But something that you can remember that means something to you, that's an easy way to do it too. So again, if someone comes across that list, they see 7 digits, they try that password, none of them are working because there's missing characters and they have no idea what those missing characters are. It could be even more than 2. It could be 4. It could be 5. It could, whatever. So it's just a way of recording your passwords without physically recording exactly what they are. It's a way to remember. So that's just something that I recommend. Going to public Wi-Fi, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we're running up on the hour here. But what I would suggest, there's a couple things. We have a couple podcasts out there on our website. I would suggest, to learn more about this, and we tackle a bunch of other things too. Facebook, social media. They're like 10, 15-minute podcasts. You can just listen to them, and really good information here. But what I will say when it comes to public Wi-Fi, I will tell everybody, anytime you're using public Wi-Fi, that means at the hotel, airport, restaurant, whatever, anything you're doing on that Wi-Fi, if you're not going to walk up to a complete stranger on the sidewalk and tell them and show them exactly what you're doing, you do not want to use public Wi-Fi. Simple as that. That's as simple as I can make it. You want to be extremely cautious of what you're doing on public Wi-Fi because it's basically there for everybody to use, and there's definitely easy ways to get into people's stuff and trick them into being able to see almost everything they're doing on that public Wi-Fi. So just be aware of that. That's about as far as I'm going to go with this. If you want to learn more on some of the risks, again, I recommend checking out that podcast that pertains to that. So just as a follow-up here and a finalization, obviously cybersecurity reminders. When it comes to data collection, some companies are required to keep certain amounts of data. Could be 5 years, could be 3 years, could be 7 years, depending on the organization. You don't want to keep any more data than that, especially online, because if you do get breached some way, shape, or form, you are responsible for all the data that you have online. So if you don't have that data online, guess what? You're not responsible for it because it's not accessible. If you have 20 years worth of data that you're storing online and you get breached, I don't care if your compliance is for 3 years, you're responsible for the full 20 years because you have it all online. And it probably was accessed. So just be aware of that. You obviously want to limit access to systems with sensitive data. Make sure that any personal devices are secured or are not being used from the business side of things. Firewalls and networks, make sure that you're using those and set up properly. If you're one of our clients, we handle all that for you. Anytime an employee leaves or gets terminated, make sure that their account is disabled. You don't have to delete it, but make sure it's disabled so they can't get into the system. The one thing I will tell you is that, that gas, the pipeline breach that happened a while back, that actually happened from a VPN account that was still active from an employee that hasn't been working there in a very long time. His passwords were compromised. and they figured out that he had a VPN account that was still active because they didn't do this, and that's what led to that ransomware attack on the pipeline. So again, it's as simple as just disabling the account. That would have stopped that. So make sure your data is backed up too. Obviously, that's your saving grace in the event that you do have a potential event. And that pretty much is it. I thank you for your time here. And there's a couple things here. Obviously, I think there's a couple things in chat maybe, but you can email us at info if you do have any other questions after the fact. There's some links here to our YouTube channel. Again, the events page that is for upcoming webinars, and these, like I said, these do get updated frequently based on how the bad guys are doing things. So I try to keep everybody up to date. Some of it does replicate, but that's pretty much all I got. So let's see here. What do we got?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. A lot of great content to digest here, as always. We do have one question that came in before we conclude. It says, are USB data blockers useful?
I'm assuming we mean like USB filtering, I think. Is that, if that's what we're talking about? So yeah, there's ways to filter the port. So it's basically port filtering. So what it does is it basically allows either the IT team or whoever to limit what that USB port can be used for. So it will, sometimes it won't let you do data transfers, which it sounds like that's what we're talking about here. And then other times it will let us, you get where you could still use a printer. So, if you disable the entire port, then any printers or anything that uses that, headphones or anything like that, or a keyboard or something, would not be able to be used. But there is ways to filter that just for data usage. So yes, I would say that is useful, and hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thanks, Brian. So I do want to just reiterate, if anyone has any concerns about the security posture of your organization, especially after hearing this training today, PCA is also happy to give a free IT assessment. So simply email us at info@pcatg.com and let us know if you're interested in that. But other than that, we'll be in touch with the recording and your certificate for completing this training. Any other final comments from you, Brian?
No, I don't think so. Actually, they just, hold on, let me see something here real quick before we let them go, because they just posted a link to what they're talking about here.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is actually, yeah, so this, what they're mentioning is a USB data blocker. So this is almost like a third-party device that kind of sits in between, it looks like, and does some of that filtering. Me personally, I'll tell you this, I've actually bought USB cables off of a charging cable off of Amazon, and it was a malicious cable. It basically was a keylogger, and it took me a little bit to figure it out. Luckily, I didn't use it to the full extent. All I did was use it as a charging thing. But it was actually malicious. So I would be cautious about any of these man-in-the-middle type things. Now, I did report that to Amazon, and it got removed very quickly. But me personally, I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to using. I would sooner block the port than use something like this where it sits in the middle. That's just me personally.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any other questions, but again, if something comes up after this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you for your time, everybody. Appreciate it. And everyone have a good afternoon.